things that ILHC does. That means the youth program, all the classes they do, the Lindy Hop Museum, more things than you'll ever know. This event tries to do so many of them for the community. So if you can think about donating, that would be huge. If you donate more than $50, we'll put your name up on the screen before the end of the weekend. So right now, let's talk about what's coming up soon and then what's up next. Up soon, we have the Advanced Classic Finals. That'll be some more amazing dancing, but first we have a very special LED talk with Ryan Francois, interviewed by Ryan Swift. This is hot Ryan on Ryan action. Stay tuned to check it out. It's gonna be amazing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to ILHC 2021. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. I'm excited to be here in my first real big event back in these pandemic times. Being careful. Got my mask handy as always. I'm very excited to be talking to our first guest in the LED series. And we'll talk about him in a second, but first I'll just let you know who I am in case you don't know. My name is Ryan Swift. I am the head DJ for ILHC, your host for our LED series this year. I'm also creator and host of the Track podcast, which currently on hiatus, but will be returning in 2022. The full archive of over 50 episodes is still available on the website, including one from 2017 with my next guest. A lot has happened since then, as everybody knows, so it's going to be great to catch up. So let me introduce a person that really needs no introduction. Always fun to do that, and I seem to do that every time I have an ILHC LED talk. In our conversation, I learned that he happened upon a poster promoting 30s dancing with judo throws in the early 1980s. Our guest, Ryan Francois, has become a master of Lindy Hop, jazz, and tap. He is a two-time winner at the US Open and American Swing Dance Championships. He has taught and performed around the world, and his choreography and performances on stage, including Swing the Musical, which I saw on Broadway, and Screen, Swing Kids, and Malcolm X, which were two of the movies that got me started dancing, have inspired generations of modern Lindy Hoppers, and I'm living proof of that. He learned directly from such legends as Mamalu Parks, Norma Miller, Pepsi Bethel, Frankie Manning, and more. Carries that torch today to this new generation of Lindy Hoppers. I am thrilled to once again be talking to Ryan Francois. Ryan, welcome. Thanks for tuning in before we fly down to ILHC.
Yeah, wow, that was a great introduction. I'd want to know that guy from that introduction. That's cool.
He seems pretty cool.
Yeah.
How's everything? Where are you right now before you fly out?
Well, currently I'm in London.
Okay.
And I've literally left dance college, a performing arts college called Bird College, where I made a 30-minute performance piece that I call The Journey of the Drum for their assessments, their end of year show for their leaving year. And they made me the patron of the college, which is really kind of cool. And
they must have read your bio.
Yeah. So, I've been teaching like jazz history for the college, and actually it's been making changes in the literally the college system for teaching performing arts. And so yeah, that's where I've been. That's what I've been up to.
Awesome. I am, like I said, I'm thrilled to catch up. It's been a long time since we've talked. It was 2017. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Nobody was wearing masks then. Nobody was social distancing. Nobody had these vaccines, but we're turning the corner. And I'll get to the state of Lindy Hop today. One of the topics that we wanted to talk about with our LED guests. And I'd love to not talk about the pandemic very much. So so let's get to the good stuff. One thing I do want to talk to you about is how it all came together back in the day. And by back in the day, I mean your beginning of encountering Lindy Hop in the early 80s. We talked a lot about it in our conversation on my podcast. But one thing that actually Tina had mentioned to me that she would love to hear more about is this kind of infamous day that we had mentioned when you came to New York City and you were seeking out some of the legends and elders And just by chance, a lot of my elders, direct elders, you all kind of converged at the same time in
Yes.
Harlem,
Yeah.
which seems impossible. And if I saw it in a movie, I would say that this is too contrived. I wouldn't believe it. Can you tell us about, your trip over, what you were looking for, and what it was like running into your contemporaries that were kind of looking for the same thing?
Well, sure. So, but like, let me start that story by making it clearer. That story, like most stories, end up in folklore and legend. And as we know, when folklore and legend starts to kick in, then the stories kind of like move slightly. And actually, the truth of it is, this happened in 1986, but the dance company that I was part of, as most people know from my beginnings, was a company called the Jive Lindy Hoppers. And we visited New York in 1985, which was the year before. And in that year, that was the year where I really met uh, Norma Miller and then Frankie Manning. It was, and we were there to actually go and work with Mamalou Parks because we'd already met Mamalou Parks in the UK. The reason why the UK was Lindy hopping at that point is because Mamalou Parks made a documentary, or she was part of a documentary that focused on her and the Lindy Hop. And she'd come to the UK to do a kind of road show, like once a year, with a tap dancer called Will Gaines, who was an American tap dancer who made himself resident in the UK probably in the 60s. Well known by some, he was actually, his manager was in the dance company with Charlie Mead, I believe. This is kind of interesting. So Mama Lou came to the UK. We went to see her perform. She was kind enough to let us dance on the stage with, not with the company, but actually in the interval, which is another story that I guess we don't have time for. But we went to the States to continue working with Mama Lou Parks in 1985. That brought us to Small's Paradise, which was as far as we understood, the only club where you could find these original dancers at that time.
I just bought this photo, by the way.
You got that at Smalls?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. It was a pretty cool place, even like, even in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And going to Smalls, I believe it was the Al Cobb's big band that used to be kind of like resident there. And Mama Lou Parks really was kind of like the resident, host of the evenings there. And so all these original dancers, not just Lindy Hoppers, but tap dancers, singers, all walks of life of jazz would turn up in that room. And my real first experience was really going into that room and again to see Mama Lou, and then finding that like there are all these other people to meet. It's where I originally met Buster Brown, because like I often think of that time as not a time of Lindy Hoppers. I think of it as a time of jazz people. And so we really didn't think of it in just terms of we're Lindy Hoppers. In a strange way, it was all about all of the jazz, tap everything. We met Mama Lou, and we met what was to become the first members of the birth of the New York Swing Dance Society. Margaret Badachuk, Bob Crease, Michael Clancy. That we met these dancers who would be attending. They would hang out at Smalls, and it's not a coincidence that, like, if you check the date of the birth of the New York Swing Dance Society, it actually coincides with that year. The Cat Club was not a thing yet; it didn't exist. That came the next year. So we went to Smalls. I think Bob Crease arranged a meeting with Norma Miller, and Norma met these very green looking English kids, you know, some of them black like me. And after she stopped laughing, because she thought that like so funny to hear our English accents, you know, she virtually said, yeah, you don't want to talk to me. If you want to talk about Lindy Hop, you need to talk to the king.
Mm.
And we're like, well, who's that? And she's like, you don't know who that is? And you call yourself Lindy Hoppers? You can kind of hear that coming out of Norma, right? Well, she said, you need to speak to Frankie Manning. We didn't know who Frankie was at that point. On that 85 trip, we also was recommended to go to a dance studio to meet a guy called Pepsi Bethel. And Pepsi was teaching at the Clark Center, which is where he was based until he died, actually. And so not only did we go and see Pepsi take his class and start to befriend this amazing man, we started to take some classes with Mumbaloo Parks. And eventually we went to go find out who this man, Frankie Manning, was. So Norma arranged for Frankie to come to the Cat Club the next week. Sorry, not the Cat Club, to Smalls. To Smalls the next week. And he was working in the post office. So he didn't come out that often. He just came out because he was curious, because there were some young kids who wanted to know stuff about Lindy Hop. So we turn up to Smalls Paradise the next week. The tradition at Smalls with the big band, and I don't know whether this is just a tradition in general, but when you were a performer or considered a performer and they found out about it, well, they expected a performance. So Al Cobbs got on the microphone and he introduced these dancers from England. We've got some dancers here from London, England, and they're going to perform for you. Of course, we panicked. We didn't know anything about Lindy Hop yet. We was expected to perform in front of all these kind of great dancers.
Yeah, the originator of the dance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But we hadn't seen Frankie at this point. We got up and we messed around a little bit. And, you know, what I learned right away is the warmth of great people. They don't put you down and go, oh, that was terrible. They were like, wow, you guys were so good. Wish we could dance like you. And I'm like, you're lying for your teeth. But thank you very much.
But so generous, right? And and also, like, you know, this is like the thing that they did. I mean, at that time it was what, 50 years ago, 40 years ago.
Yes.
And they're like, wow, kids, it must have been something, right?
It was an important time. And it's an important time. The reason why I even mentioned this year before is not so relevant to me other than it's accurate, but it's more that the climate at that point was, we are getting old and we have a dance that not many people are interested in of a young age who may have the talent, capability, physicality for us to pass it to. So this was like this fresh hotbed of guys and women who'd reached a certain age that they realized that time was running out and all this information was going to disappear with them. So they were more than open to anybody coming forwards at that point. And this was not unique to Lindy Hoppers. It was the same for the tap dancers. It was the same for like just the singers, for the musicians. Everyone was very conscious that they were on the bottom of the ninth, as Norma would describe it. And we see these young people who are suddenly interested, and they were falling over themselves quite literally to share it. When Frankie arrived, he walked in after we did our performance, and I saw this kind of, you know, quite large, bald-headed, big smiling face guy walking towards us saying, "Hi, I'm Frankie Manning." And we're like, you know, firstly, of course, we didn't understand who he was yet. I just understood that this energy walked towards us that was very happy and warm. Of course, we said the stupid thing. What did you think of the performance? And Frankie, in his gracious Frankie way, said, "Just keep going, just keep going."
At least he didn't tell you to stop.
No, he
He'd
didn't.
be like, "Nah, you're good."
That was Norma's job. Norma
Yeah.
would say, "Hey, you guys don't Lindy Hop," but
Mhm.
like Frankie was a different thing, you know.
Yeah. So that actually makes me curious. Yeah, I'm gonna jump ahead multiple decades at this point, and not to make us both feel old, but multiple decades pass by after that. Um, where Lindy Hop scene is an interesting place. How do you feel about the state of the community, the dance? How do you feel about it?
Well, that's the, you know, like I said, where I just came from was the theater. And I did a depiction of the story of the history of jazz, coming from the birthplace of a drum and an African. And I moved through the eras. I moved through like slavery, minstrelsy, cakewalk. And I had just started that journey when 3 Black people stood up and left. Because I, you know, in order to tell the story, I couldn't depict it with only Black people because they don't exist in college. Now, they stayed because they wanted to challenge me. And so just before coming here, I had to justify why I made the work the way I did. And I had to explain to them that up until this point, colleges have never even addressed the stories of Black people and the art forms that they have built their institutions off of. The fact they let me in the building is already a miracle. But to start them on the journey of actually looking at what they're doing and what they're making and what they've been doing is not a journey to kind of like flip a switch and expect change to happen, which is what's happening now. I mean, I had that in the theater only to walk out to find out that a white supremacist has got off scot-free from murdering people at a Black rally. And it was clear to me that change is going to come, as always, slowly. And it made me think about when I started Lindy hopping, what was the landscape for me as a young person, and how, even though I was in a time, let's say, that had the presence of even more racism than maybe what is current, which is now no longer true. My dance company that I started in 1987 was 99% Black people. And of all of those dancers in that company and all the companies to follow in those years, I don't see a single one of them around now. However, I had maybe 2% of those people were white, and those white people are all successful dancers, and they are around now. And that's what I was thinking about when I started Lindy hopping in supposedly the point where we needed to be saved. I stood in rooms full of Black people. In the Cat Club, there was a sea of them. But that's not to say that was the only place where I met and intermingled with more, let's say, of the Black universe. Very slowly and steadily, that began to change. Today, even when we post images of the Lindy Hop to promote our events, I'm more likely to see an image that's more akin to Dean Collins than I am to see one akin to Frankie Manning. I see that stylistically we have moved the goalposts to what we think is more appropriate to our sense of aesthetics. There's a simplicity to Lindy Hop and the original Lindy Hoppers that retains a feeling. And that feeling is that feeling, and I won't say African American, I'll say the feeling of Blackness. And the feeling of Blackness and the pain that comes with an oppressive, a culture that has been oppressed for not just hundreds of years, more than that. When they were painting Jesus's face white instead of black, that tells you how long oppression for Black people has really existed. And what I see now is there's no sense of responsibility for sustaining those parts that might not be so important to the white populace that now dominates the Lindy Hop, because it doesn't reflect their characters. So there's a kind of reappropriation happening that we think that we're not part of. That's the thing that's interesting to me. Most white people right now would be horrified if they were accused of appropriation, and if they were accused of like not doing anything other than loving and revering Norma Millers and Frankie Mannings and so on and so forth. But it's very convenient to hold up idols and do things in their name, but not necessarily do things in their image. And so I applaud a lot of the things that I see in the community. I know that they love the dance, they do love the people, but they also love themselves to a point where they're not willing to sacrifice that aspect to truly look at what they're doing and what they're reflecting. So long as I'm enjoying myself, that's good enough. But look at the landscape around you. Yes, you see some Black people, but how many Black people don't you see? And surely for something that has been going as a movement now for almost 40 years, you would think that like there wouldn't be such a large disparity of white and Black people involved in the current scene of Lindy Hop.
Does that influence you to change the way that you teach and the way that you reach out as this one of the torchbearers that's still going?
It tells me I can't retire.
Good, because we don't want you to retire.
Yeah, but like I think that like it just means that like we have tried different ways to change the course of behavior in history, and clearly the ways that we're trying don't work, because it just takes a new generation to just reset the posts again, and now we're starting from the beginning. Self-reflection is the hardest thing, and most don't want to do it. So I look to, let's call them the leaders, to actually look at what they're responsible for and ask themselves if they feel responsible. But maybe they don't. Maybe they're just also enjoying the ride. But our celebrations are of things that actually could be considered naive. We celebrate the culture as if that culture was devoid or absent of racism, you know, right down to how we dress. If you realize that like you dress in an oppressor's clothing and celebrate it like it was like this happy time. And so when you're kind of like pushing forwards images that actually represented the people who were segregating Black people, the people who were making sure that when Frankie and Norma and et al. Were doing Hell's a Popping, they were dressed as workers, as maids and cooks.
Service.
If yes, you're celebrating that era, dressing like it, trying to be like it, and glamorizing it as if it was glamorous. Well, it was glamorous at the expense of. And while you continue to glamorize it, you are not acknowledging that it's at the expense of. And the point of the rebirth of Lindy Hop for people like me was to hold a mirror up to what was wrong, not to reinforce it and to perpetuate it. It was to say, look, this dance, you think it died because you killed it. You killed it because you didn't look at the people that you took those art forms from, yet didn't reward them or respect what they wanted for their art forms. And that's the most important thing. It's not that you do the art form, it's that you have to acknowledge the people who did create those things. What did they want for the art form? And it might not have been what you want for it. And so there is a dividing line of whether you are someone enjoying an art form as a bystander, a passenger who's let's say enjoying the smell of the flowers, or whether you're trying to be the flower, and in so being so, you're consuming that flower and turning it into something else. There's room for everything, including that. But right now, I feel that there's an overstep balance. We are starting to look like Jitterbug. We're starting to look like Dean Collins, and we're even justifying that, hey, he's a Lindy Hopper as well. Well, he's not a Black Lindy Hopper. And there's a difference in that imagery, that energy. The white Lindy Hop had its day. It remains the thing that is celebrated in history. That's how, as a young Black kid, I knew already who Glenn Miller was, who Elvis Presley was. I knew GIs did this thing called the Jitterbug. I didn't need to be told those things. Those things had been educated to me. So don't push it in front of the Lindy Hop and try and say, well, we need to own this too, so therefore we'll call this Lindy Hop and say it's all about everyone. Well, it's not. There were Black people who innovated for the very purpose of staying ahead of those white jitterbugs. That's what made them make air steps, what made them dance faster and higher. And now today you want to equalize this, it's not equal. Lindy Hop does belong to a Black face, and please acknowledge it more.
We are sadly out of time, but this is a perfect segue into the one last thing that I wanted to just touch on, which was Saturday at 11:15 a.m. you are going to be teaching and I think streaming a master's class, and it is called Back to Basics.
Yes. Apparently there's a feeling that, like, when I do basic steps, they feel and look different. Well, probably the reason is that, like, I learned my basics from the people who kind of made them. And so there are things in the basic steps that I know is missing just with the choices of how you do them. And since I do understand that jazz movement cannot be separated from a jazz personality, then I try to teach you the personality of the movement as well as the movement itself.
And is that, it sounds to me like that's carrying on everything that you were just talking about before that question.
I truly hope so, but every day I always feel not worthy of that task. You know, well, the people before me were much greater.
Well, we always, you know, you stand on the shoulders of those before you, and we absolutely, you know, recognize their greatness, and also just, I'm grateful that you were there to help, you know, educate the rest of us that were too young to be there or too early to be there, and carry on that for us. It's amazing, and I'm looking forward to that class. I'm looking forward to seeing you at ILHC, and I just want to say thanks again for sitting down, and I know you're busy and packing, and getting ready for a big weekend. So Ryan, thanks so much for joining me, and we're going to be putting this out, and everyone will get to watch it. So I'll be seeing you soon. Any closing thoughts?
Just thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm gonna.
Thank you so much to Ryan Swift for interviewing, and of course, Ryan Francois for spitting the knowledge. As always, thank you so much. One of my mentors out there. I hope you guys really enjoyed that.